Hello, and welcome back to the Avoiding Average podcast. My name is Susan Gates, your host, and today we have another guest. Her name is Candace Dudley, and she is a podcasting guest coach. And I will let her explain that a little bit more, because I know that that's not necessarily the most common thing you've ever heard of. And so I'm excited for her to share her story and explain that a little bit more for anybody who's interested in being on a podcast. So Candace, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I was a teacher for 13 years and I had my own kids back to back to back, three of them in a row. And that's when I was like, you know what? This doesn't feel good anymore. I'm really exhausted when I get home. I didn't dislike teaching, but I didn't like how I was showing up at home for my own
Mm-hmm.
children. I felt like they really were getting my leftovers. So
Mm-hmm.
during those years, you're grasping at straws and trying to figure out how am I going to change this? How am I going to get out? And I dabbled in network marketing, did that for a period of time. It was kind of like a crash course into entrepreneurship. I'm not affiliated anymore, but it taught me a lot of great things and was kind of a stepping stone into the next thing and the next thing. And in that time, I also started my own podcast. I felt like I was home on my maternity leave, postpartum, feeling really lonely, isolated, that kind of thing. So I had started my own podcast. It's going to be 4 years old this summer. And
Nice.
that's really transformed into an entrepreneurial focused show now. And of course, giving podcasting tips and especially podcast guesting tips. So
Mm-hmm.
in the last year, that's really been a light bulb moment for me. There was a lot of pivots, a lot of burnout, a lot of different things of just figuring
Mm-hmm.
things out when you kind of change your whole identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized the thing that never kind of went away was podcasting. That was always fun to me. It always was a
Mm-hmm.
passion of mine. And that's when I really started taking it seriously and started utilizing the skills I had developed for myself to help other people. And that kind of led me into my niche of the guesting side because I have that experience being a host and interviewing lots of people and
Mm-hmm.
getting cold pitches and all of those different things as a host, as you know, we get. And then I've been guesting a ton this year. Like I've been on like 30 plus shows, and I just say that to kind of give you context of like what's possible. There's people that do more and less, but to me, it's the ultimate networking tool. I'm an
Mm-hmm.
introvert. I'm a busy mom of three. I don't have tons of time, and podcasts and guesting can be long form content. It can last for
Mm-hmm.
you and work for you. It's searchable. So there's so many great benefits to it. And that's why it's something I have decided to take very seriously and use as a strategy in my business. And that's what I've been helping people with this year, is just really nailing their speaking topics so that's very natural to then talk about, some of their offers that they have, and doesn't feel like you're giving a sales pitch. You're giving
Mm-hmm.
value, but also saying, hey, I help people with what I'm
Yeah.
talking about too. And so I think it's a really authentic, genuine way to make connections and
Mm-hmm.
build a network.
Yeah. That's such a cool thing to think about. And like me, I mean, I host people all the time, right? And like I love interviewing people, but going on as a guest to somebody else's podcast, not exactly natural for me.
Mm-hmm.
um and and so I guess like what was that like for you, going the shifting between, having your own podcast to guesting on other people's podcasts? What differences did you see there?
That's a really good question. I actually dabbled in guesting a few years ago.
Okay.
And from those experiences, you learn a lot. I always tell my client, we have to start where we are, let yourself be a beginner. But I can look back at those. I mean, there is an embarrassing moment where one of the hosts, like, she had to cut me off, and she needed to. I was trying to tell my whole life story when I was asked
Mm-hmm.
to introduce myself. And yes, I do think you want to give pieces of your story because that's how people connect with you. That's how people are like, oh, she's me, or like, I feel seen from her or
Mm-hmm.
him or whatever. But you don't have enough time to give like the whole thing, every pivot, every twist and turn. So that's one thing that you want to really keep short and sweet, and then let the host kind of guide that. So that's a difference for sure. And just, learning those different nuances of being a guest. And it's one podcast episode. So whereas on my own show, I might have, 6, 7 episodes on one topic, but different parts of that topic, to try to mesh that into one show as a guest because you are excited to talk about all of those things. That also is kind of like a no for me. I'm like, it's too much, right? The listener, it's just too much for them to take in. And at the end, they're not really going to think of you top of mind for a specific topic because you've talked about 7 different things. So some of those things are different than when you're hosting your own show, interviewing someone else. You have to kind of be intentional
Hmm.
about what you're going to talk about. So I think about it as a guest, you think about, what kind of offers do you already have? Do you have free downloadables, things like that, where at the end of the
Hmm.
show, when the host says, "Hey, where can we find you? Where can the people go hang out with you and come join your neck of the woods?" You have a thing that's like a quick win, an easy thing for someone to be like, "Yes, I've listened to this whole episode. I am so engaged. I'm connecting with you. Yes, absolutely. I want to go download that resource you have." So when you have like 5, 6 of them and you're trying to jam them all in one episode, then that is like too much for a
Yeah.
listener and people in general. And
Yeah.
they're just probably not going to act. So thinking about the
Sure.
fluidity of all of that is a little bit different, when you're guesting, but it's just about being a little bit intentional, giving it a little thought, and then
Hmm.
getting specific about what you're going to talk about, because that's how the referrals come. That's how the host is going to think of you when someone comes to them and asking about what you do. They're going to think of you and you'll be top of mind. So it's a little bit different than when you're hosting your own show, because I know I have guests on too, and it's pretty much anything entrepreneurial. So it can be like a lot of different things. But when you're guesting, if you're guesting as like a strategy in your business to really, uh, bring in more aligned followers, clients potentially, then you do want to be a little intentional.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. I think being able to kind of narrow that down or narrow in that focus makes it easier for people to associate one thing with you as opposed to, you know, so many different things, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't mean
uh,
that you don't do other things in your business.
mhm.
You most certainly do, I'm sure,
Yeah.
and that's fine. But you to talk about it in one podcast episode is like it's too much. You have to like rein it in.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely understand. And I think like, just in like the experiences that I've had in terms of interviewing other people, it's like, depending on how familiar they are with, um, being on a podcast or being interviewed at all, really. I mean, I don't know that a lot of people are used to being interviewed at all.
Right.
And so it's a completely new experience and trying to understand, what works best for the podcast format, um, is very helpful. So before we kind of go way down this path of really understanding, the ins and outs of what you do and how you help people, I would love to kind of take it a step back, right? Like you had mentioned that you were a teacher for 13 years, correct?
Hmm.
Um, so I imagine being an entrepreneur wasn't really on your mind going into teaching or anything like that. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about, what life was like growing up for you, what was considered average, and where you thought you were going.
I actually love that your show is called this, because average was talked about in my house as something that was not okay for us. It was okay for other
Uh,
people, but
yeah.
not here, not for us. And it was meant to be a really motivational, positive thing, as kids, like it, and that permission to say, we don't need to settle for that. If we want to go past the average, if we want to go and reach for, the stars and something more, we're allowed. And that kind of was the message that was driven home to us. So I come from a really close family. I'm the oldest of 4. We're all within 5 years of each other, and a big sports family, to the point that my dad was my basketball coach in high school. My sister is a year younger than me, played on the team. We won a state
Hmm.
championship together. Like, we
Nice.
were together. My mom did the stats and took the book. My brothers were younger. They videotaped the games. Like, everyone had a role,
Hmm.
and sports to us was family time. And so I think when you're dealing in that competitive arena as sports
Hmm.
are, um, average and things is something that's like top of mind, because you always are striving to be better than that. So that's kind of a snapshot of how I grew up and the messaging that I was kind of fed.
Yeah. That's interesting though, like because I've heard that before, where average wasn't acceptable in a sense, but it was more from like a average is not good enough, as opposed to
Mm,
you are allowed to be more than
yes,
average, and I think those are two very different things, or two very
absolutely.
different mindsets.
They are. I agree. Yeah. One is um like a scarcity thing, or almost like a punishment. Like, if you don't hit the bar that's set, it's a bad thing. And I think the flip side as to, and there is pressure, like there was a feeling of pressure too. So there were expectations, and trying to be better than average, and sometimes you weren't, but you always knew that your family had your back, like you could
Mm-hmm.
come home, that kind of thing. It's just that we're going to give our best effort in the things that we do. And I think that's a lesson that I can kind of take into entrepreneurship that a lot of us need to take with is I am going to fail. I am going to have some missteps. Just like in sports, you lose games. Nobody doesn't lose a game or miss a shot in
Mm-hmm.
basketball. And it's very relatable to life and motherhood and entrepreneurship because you have to take those things and then you learn. You decide,
Mm-hmm.
do I want to get better or am I okay with this? So,
Mm-hmm.
and either answer I think is fine. It's not one's good or one's bad. But if you don't feel like you're okay with where you are, well, then how do you get better? Well, you practice or you do something, you reflect, you change something, you pivot. And the quicker you can do that, I think that's that's where in our business we find the most alignment, and in our life the quicker that we can keep pivoting when we feel like something's off, something's not right, something's not good enough. To me, I can relate it to like when it feels average. And I feel like average doesn't feel like a great thing. Like it has a
Yeah.
connotation where it's just like meh. And
Yeah.
so if you're feeling that, just know like you're allowed to trade that feeling for something better, and that there is something better out there, and making pivots and adjusting is how you're going to get to that something better, even though sometimes you can't see the full picture or like all the next steps, but I bet you can see the one single next step, the next closest step. And so I just encourage people to take that one because that's how the rest of it gets revealed to you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love the analogy to sports and to basketball, right? Like you're not gonna get you're not gonna make every single shot you take, right? And I think for a lot of people who had maybe the more of the pressure side of exceeding average, that's a hard pill to swallow. But I think, like you had mentioned, is once you kind of start to get in the mindset of, okay, we can take that as a learning experience. It didn't feel right for me, but how can we change this, or how can we pivot, and how can we keep moving forward? I think that's a healthier way of looking at that. And really, I think that's the way that we all kind of make it through life in a sense. Is you see what's not working, and then you just go with what's next. What gets you a little closer. So you had mentioned like in maternity leave, that's when you had decided to start the podcast, and um, I imagine that was a little bit of a pivot for you too, right?
Big one, yes.
So can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit more, I guess, about what just made you decide to start a podcast?
Yeah. I had joined a wellness community and started running my own accountability groups for other moms. And the coach that I had was fantastic. And she turned me on to personal development for the first time. And I had a growth mindset just in the sports world and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. There's that growth mindset, but not necessarily in my own thinking or thinking about my own thinking and that kind of thing. So that was a huge door that just blew open and
Mm-hmm.
started to change things, right? Because I started reading things about my mindset and all that good stuff. And in that time I started listening to podcasts, and I
Mm-hmm.
love them. And it
Yeah.
was something I could just plug in my ears if I was rocking the baby at nap time, or walking the kids in the stroller, something like that. And it just fit with my lifestyle, and it
Mm-hmm.
helped me feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
But in the same sense, I felt like I didn't hear like my own story being shared, someone that was like me being talked about. And so that is where I kept thinking, I just kept feeling pulled towards, I want to start my own. But even posting on social media at that time was way outside of my comfort zone. So to think that I was going to go from like 0 to 100 and start yapping on a podcast was wild. I was shy, introverted, all these excuses like I'm teaching full time, I have 3 little kids, like what am I thinking?
Mm-hmm.
And so it took a year. It was probably a year of thinking about it, just constantly feeling that like nudge that
Mm-hmm.
this is something I want to do. Don't really know why. Just keep feeling this. And I can tell you, if you are or have something in your life that you keep thinking about, keep dreaming about, it's on your mind, it's not going to go away until you shoot your shot. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we have to just sometimes do that and see what happens, because, what's the best thing that could happen? What's the worst thing that could happen? And then what are all the great successes and learning moments that are going to happen most likely in between that? So I started my show on a whim. It was nap time, and I had ordered a microphone 3 months ago, let it sit in the box. I kept Googling, thinking I need to learn one more thing, It was just an excuse, And I just remember thinking, like, in 2 weeks, I'm going back to teaching because summer break was going to end for us. And I was like, if I don't take action a year from now, I'm going to be in this exact same spot. And that was kind of like a inspired, messy action type moment where I was like, I got to put the baby down. She's napping, and I'm going to go hit record because I can't stay here. I know I need to take action. So I just did. And the first episode is still out there. It's like 6 minutes. I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know any of that stuff. So it's just a raw shot of me. The episode is about starting before you're ready. So I can just vividly remember that because it's exactly what I was doing. And so a lot of it was, mindset work, motherhood things, that kind of thing in the beginning. And then it just kept shifting into entrepreneurial things and business type things and podcasting. So that's really how it started, was just very messy. It was kind of a side project I had. It was just like a fun little thing I did on the side, that kind of feeling about it. It wasn't until a few years in where I was like, I'm going to take this seriously. What's going on here? It's just like a mindset or some inner work I think that needed to be done, because I remember thinking in the beginning, I wish I could start this, but like, I don't want anyone at work to listen to this, or I don't really want to tell any. And then it's like, why would you? That's the point, is to have people listen to it. So, but your inner work just has to come along with you. And I think it's a constant ongoing thing. I know it is for me. So that just had to catch up. But in the meantime, I was still taking that messy action and putting an episode out every week. And eventually I learned how to edit, and you learned how to put music on an intro and, all these other things. But I would just say, don't let all those pieces stop you in the beginning, no matter what it is. You can start with what you know, and you're going to learn so much more by jumping in and doing it. I learned so much more from hitting record that day than I ever could while I kept Googling and searching for and learning new things on there.
Yeah. I love that, your story, and then also the advice that comes along with it, because I was in a little bit of a similar state when I had first started the podcast too, where I was like, I've been thinking about this for a little while, not quite a year, but like it had been months. I had ordered a mic, and then I ended up returning it because I was like, no, I don't have time for this. I can't do this. And then I just, I was like, screw it. I'm just going to do it. I had like one of those little clip-on mics or whatever. I literally recorded my first episode in the car going to pick up my kids from daycare, and you could hear like the turn signals and stuff in the background. And
I love it.
And it's just like a similar sort of thing, right? You just have to do it, and you just have to go with it and commit to it and figure it out later. And I'm still figuring things out. And so
That's what you'll learn, is that you think there's some secret, or the people ahead of you have it all figured out. And the more guesting I do, the more podcasters I meet, you just learn that everyone is figuring it out. So do things your own way, do things that feel good to you. You can take other people's advice, but leave the advice that doesn't feel great in your body. Check in with yourself. And that's the beauty of it, that there's room for all of us. There's literally so many people on this earth, and how amazing that there's people like waiting for your story and waiting for your take on things to connect with you. So there's plenty of people, plenty of audiences and things waiting for you. I think that can be a hurdle that we have in the beginning with a lot of things, but podcasting for sure, where we think, oh, it's so saturated, there's too many people. It's like 85 or 90% of people don't make it past episode 10.
wow.
It's staggering statistics. There's room for you. There's literally room for all of us.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. Because I've like interacted with other people who were interested in starting their own podcast, but then, the negative self-talk that comes up is like kind of prevents you from going into it. Or like, oh, there are too many people. Everyone has a podcast, yada, yada, yada. And I mean, I get that. Like, and I always challenge it with the same thing that I'll say to anybody who's like hesitant to go after whatever career that they want is, if you think about like graduating from college, you went into a teaching role, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. if you use the same excuse, like, oh, there are already so many teachers, there's no way I'm going to get a job, that just sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Because it's like
Absolutely.
you graduate from college expecting that you'd be able to go into one of those careers, and there's always going to be space somewhere. Maybe
There's
it takes
that's
longer
a
than others, but yeah.
Right. That's a good point because when you graduate college, you don't wonder or worry about that. Like
No.
when I was going into the teaching field, that was when it was crazy. There was so many teachers. There was over 400 people for my one elementary teaching job that I got. But you don't go I didn't leave college thinking I'm so worried about getting a job. I just left knowing I'm going to get a job. That's what you
Yeah.
do. You go to
Yeah.
if you graduate college with the teaching, you'll find a job. But then there was 400 other people out there not getting a job just in my one area, right? But we're so quick to not think like that
Hmm.
as entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And it's
It's
crazy
interesting.
it is interesting to think about. And I think it's like part of it is entrepreneurship is just this, it's like the Wild West in a sense,
Oh my
right?
gosh. It so
There's
is.
like there's so many different ways to do it and so many different things that you could do that, carving your own path is part of the journey, really. So for you, like as you've been working with other people who, have their own businesses, they're guesting on podcasts to get more exposure. What kind of challenges do you work with them through? Because I imagine there's, you know, it's more than just the technical part of getting onto a podcast. Um, what other things do you usually work with them on?
Yeah, the technical part is usually pretty easy. It's like you
Mhm.
need just a really simple microphone. Mine's like $40 on Amazon. And other than that, you don't need a lot technically. So the main thing that comes up is people wanting to guest on podcasts, but thinking about it like public speaking and thinking I could
Mhm.
never do that. And it's so different than that, right? It's not like getting on a stage talking to a room full of hundreds of people. It's such a controlled environment. And so with that, it's what am I going to talk about? So I help them with that. The main thing I help them do is come up with 3 really solid speaking topics because it becomes really easy, I think, when you have those picked out. And I like to write them as episode titles because there's that
Mm.
host in me that if I share 3 possible episode titles with my threads, like on my threads account or on social
Mhm.
media, a host is scrolling and they see that and they can immediately identify if it's a yes or no. Yes, I
Mhm.
that's for me on my show. And also when you get so specific, that's how you find it becomes easier to find the shows you want to be on because
Mhm.
it's going to eliminate certain ones that don't fit those topics. And when those topics also are cohesive with what you do as a service or products you offer, it becomes really easy to just nail the value part of your talk, which is the whole meat of the podcast, because it's already stuff that you do and you're so entwined with that you're an expert in and you are passionate about, and it's going to be easy to talk about. And in that same breath, it's going to naturally come up that, hey, I also do this for other people. Or you're going to reference, I helped my clients with this. Or I had a client one time that did that. And it
Mhm.
just becomes this very natural thing that the right people that need you are going to be able to find you and identify you because of having those specific speaking topics. It's gonna you're going to end up on more aligned shows, and the more aligned shows that you can be on, the warmer the audience, the more engaged they're likely to be with you and connect with you and then join you. You don't need, like, we don't need thousands of people to join us, right? As service providers or coaches or things. I mean, honestly, how many clients do we each need? Like a handful. So when you think about it that way too, it makes a lot of sense that from one guesting experience that could happen. But definitely the a fear of speaking, and then wondering what you're going to talk about. So that's what I help people work through for sure. And just little tips like keeping your intro short, sending them to one place at the end of the episode, those types of things that just help move a potential new client or fan along the path if they want to stay connected with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fair. I think I I I wonder like how many people have that fear of speaking in front of others, and it's funny that you had brought up the public speaking part of it because in some ways I can see that there are parallels, right? You're
Hmm.
still talking to an audience in a sense, but it's, I don't know. I always feel like interviews feel a little bit less pressure, a little more informal in a sense too, because you're really just having a conversation with somebody. And so,
Absolutely.
um, I I wonder like how many entrepreneurs out there are like
I think it's
are working through some
surprising.
of those.
Yeah, I think it's surprising. I think just showing up on social media is a lot different than
Mm-hmm.
thinking about like speaking and really using your voice for an extended amount of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most like reels or things, even if you did a talking one, it's like 60 seconds, maybe up to
Mm-hmm.
2 minutes. But if you're going to get on a podcast, you might be chatting with someone for 20, 30, up to an hour sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the intimidating part of thinking about, I'm going to say too much. I'm going to do this. But most podcasts, I tell my clients, most podcasts do some type of editing. So if you really mess up, for mine, I at least let them know ahead of time. If you can be like, full stop, I want to re-say that. That was not right. And I'll cut that out.
Mm-hmm.
But that's appropriate things to ask a host too. If you are planning to guest with someone, you can say, hey, I just want to make sure I do the best job I can. Do you have any questions that you might ask me that I can just
Mm-hmm.
start thinking about? Most hosts will provide that. And
Mm-hmm.
you can also ask, just wondering if you do any editing, just want to just mentally prepare. They'll
Mm-hmm.
let you know. Some are a straight shot, they don't edit, but then that's their style. That's
Mm-hmm.
their, they want it to be conversational and sound very real. And
Mm-hmm.
I like to do more of an edit because I like my episodes to come out short as possible that they can
Mm-hmm.
get the information in, and then also have my guests or myself sound like be in the best light that we can be in, right? So I tell them to, like, if you are watching something or even a big production company, that's what we end up comparing ourselves to, like those huge podcasts. When we're independent people running a podcast,
Right.
we're just humans.
Yeah.
If you are not hearing and filler words like and so and someone probably edited those out, or that person has years of repetition and practice in speaking. So one of the other, and you aren't in that same ballpark. So don't beat yourself up about that. It's very normal. Most people don't even pay attention to that type of thing unless of course you're saying something, one of those filler words. If you say it like all the time, repeated over and over, like multiple times in a sentence, people might be like, I don't know. So just watch that. But usually that's not how people are talking. And so we're just our own worst critic when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's funny when I look back at some of the episodes that I did either by myself or just even just editing a normal conversation. I do notice the ums and the you knows, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh wow,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize I said it that often, but yeah, for reference, I do edit those out. So
Yeah, I like to say that on my show too, because it's just too easy. It's just too easy in our day and age, in our world, to see social media perfection, to see other people's podcasts that sound perfect and that kind of thing. And so I do like to share kind of the real truths that are most likely happening. Or somebody that's doing a solo episode, they might have a script. So
mm-hmm.
they've put in that extra work to have that script and not have those filler words because they're going off of that. So there's ways around it, but I think the best podcasts sound conversational, laid back, real, and authentic. So just show up as your best self. Trust that you're gonna you're gonna deliver your message that you're excited about, especially when you've taken the time to get those speaking topics nailed down, because that's gonna ensure that most of the conversation is gonna be something that you know so much about. And that should be
Mm-hmm.
really comforting.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really solid advice. Is um, making sure that you are comfortable with whatever it is that you're planning on talking about. I think I don't know. I could talk about a million different things and go a million different ways with conversations. And
Yeah.
so it can be a challenge for me sometimes to even just narrow that down and be so focused on one or two things. Um and so like from your own experience, have have you experimented working with scripts for
For like my own
your
show.
well, for your own show, but then also like if you're going on to speak at somebody else's, like perhaps maybe when you first started guesting,
Mm-hmm.
um, is it beneficial to have a script for somebody who has their speaking topic, but maybe wants to be a little bit more sure in what they're saying?
usually what I do for myself, especially in the beginning when you're just starting to do this, because you'll get on the spot and I don't know what to, my brain will go blank, or you're worried that that'll happen to you. And so I like to just have some post-it notes. I
Mm,
don't necessarily need them anymore because I've had the reps put in, but
mhm,
in the beginning, I'll have some post-it notes and just have like, if there were 3 points, 3 bullets of my value that I wanted to make sure to hit, I might write those down, because maybe I'm talking about number 1 and I get through number 2 and I'm like, oh no, wait, what's number 3? I can't remember. And then that just eases your mind that I just
mhm.
have this right here. I
Yeah,
don't love like a word for word script, because I think the listener listening can tell when you're reading
yeah.
something, but whatever is going to make you feel more at ease and let you start your podcasting or guesting journey, do it. If I have gotten questions in the beginning, I would maybe in a Google Doc have them up on the side of the screen and have notes written down.
Mhm.
A lot of shows like you and I, we probably aren't sending word for word questions, and I'm probably going to ask you something else on my show that I didn't send you, because that's where the conversation is going and I love that. So just knowing and being prepared that it could go off script, but that's probably a really great thing, because you're in a topic or something that the host and you are jiving with and excited and just kind of going down a rabbit hole. And I love that. Yeah, I like some notes. That's my favorite tip, would be to have notes and some bullet points just right next to you or on your mic or up, where people can't see it, because it just eases your mind that you're not gonna get asked something and be like, I can't remember what I was gonna say. So, and you'll get better at it. You'll keep tweaking it and honing in on it. And the other ripple effect that I've noticed is, the more I keep doing this, it forces you to tell your story and your messaging. And all of a sudden now I have clearer things to say on social media, or
Mm,
more aligned things to send my email list, because I'm practicing my messaging over and over. And it's a lot different than just typing up a social media post or something short
mhm.
like that. So it's been really interesting to see that kind of ripple effect too, that I wasn't quite prepared to
Yeah.
notice, or expecting. I guess that's the word.
Yeah. No, that is interesting too to think about. I think it is different when you are speaking, like verbally, as opposed to typing it out or even just thinking about it in your head, because I think it comes out maybe a little bit more natural too when you're speaking, as opposed to writing or ruminating, I should say.
Absolutely.
Um,
Definitely someone listening to you speak on a podcast, or even seeing you in a video on a podcast, which so many of them are today, that trust factor, that connection that they can feel with you, it's going to happen so much faster and deeper than how long it would take on social media to build that up with more
mm,
curated pictures and things. Even if you are
mhm,
talking for a few seconds on your stories, if someone is going to listen to your whole entire podcast episode, like, you can't even pay for that type of attention span and
mm,
engagement, if you think about it. Because think about, if you're going to social media, a lot of times we're going to scroll and doom
mhm,
scroll. We're not in the mindset that we're like looking for something or trying to learn something or get a new tip or that kind of thing. But if you're going to a podcast, you're probably in the mindset of ready to learn something, working on your mindset. You're in a it's like very different vibe, very different mindset, and you're ready to and open to hearing a story or a tip or advice. And it's just a very different thing. And I think that that is one thing that sets it apart from social media and other marketing avenues, because it's just like so much faster to build that trust and connection, because they can see you, they can hear you. It's just different. It's so different, and it can just
yeah.
happen so much faster.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with that because I think there's more presence in speaking and in seeing somebody like the I don't know. I guess you can kind of get that from pictures too, but that's a little bit more curated,
Hmm.
and you're not always getting everything. I mean, yes, podcasts are edited too, but they still feel a little bit more legit
Hmm.
than
Yeah,
some of the stuff you might come
absolutely.
across.
Absolutely.
Pivoting a little bit, you are a podcast host and you have hosted other people on your podcast. What what advice, I guess, would you give to other podcasters out there in looking for aligned guests?
Mm.
Because there are a lot of people out there. I think I remember when I had first posted, I'm going to start a podcast on Threads and I will be looking for guests eventually. I got so many people who
Probably
were like,
went
I want to be
viral.
on a podcast. Well,
Yes.
I don't know about viral, but there
Yeah.
there were so
Yeah.
many people that responded and they were like, I want to be on your podcast, and they had no idea what it was about. They didn't even know what it was called.
Yes.
And so, how do you filter out the right people?
Well, first of all, if it's your podcast, you have done the work to grow your audience and
Mm-hmm.
connect with them and nurture them and build their trust. So you absolutely need to protect that, and you
Mm-hmm.
have the permission to protect that, and you do not need to say yes to
Mm-hmm.
just anybody. I think sometimes we, I don't know if it's the people pleasers in us, the whatever. If someone asks, we want to say yes, we need to vet that, because if you bring them on, it's like telling your audience without telling them that I vet this person. I have checked them out. I trust them. You can trust them too. That's really what I think is happening when you have that guesting relationship, which is why it can be so powerful to do that. But as the host, it lands on you to
Mm-hmm.
decide. So you have to be really ready to say no, and this isn't a good fit right now. Um, that's okay to say. That's first and foremost. And then to, you know, help them be aligned with your show. I like to prep them with some things and let them know that I do quicker episodes, like 20 to 30
Mm-hmm.
minutes, because I have busy mom entrepreneurs listening to this, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an hour long show, but there are other ones that are. So I like to let them know that. I try to kind of prep them. We're going to start with this. I do edit. I put them at ease.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they know what we're going to like talk about as far as like the main focus. Obviously, you're going to go down different avenues. It's fun to do that, but letting them know the main focus so that part is really clear, that value that you want your audience to take away from the show is clear too. But I think the biggest thing is just making sure that you check them out. And if your gut feeling is like, I don't see how this is a fit, then you just need to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fair. I think it's I don't know. I don't know that I really necessarily thought about like podcast guesting as an avenue
Hmm.
for reach and growth in that regard. And so um, I think I was a little surprised when I saw so many people who were so interested. And I think I have gotten a few cold DMs, and
Hmm.
one of them did end up coming on my show and had like an amazing conversation. I absolutely loved it. Um, but there are also some where I'm like, I don't know about this.
Yeah, you can kind of tell if it's a copy paste or it's like a cold pitch that they haven't listened to your show and they don't really
Yeah.
know what you're about. That's really easy to spot. Even if they drop my favorite is they think they're getting by and being slick because they'll use a title of one of your episodes and they say, "Oh, I
Mm.
love listening to this title."
Hmm.
And then it's like, "Oh, but my client is a male realtor and my show is for female entrepreneurship." So I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe you grab that one title, but you're missing the mark here. This is a no. But
Yep.
I definitely think a DM goes a lot longer and more like human, genuine type of way than getting an email. I think podcasters are
Mm.
burnt out on just big companies that are sending emails on behalf of their clients, and they're very pushy and they're copy pasted like that. Sometimes they spell your name wrong or get your podcast show name wrong, and you're like, just have this ick feeling about the emails.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying I've never booked a guest from getting an email from them, because there are people that will send, like you said, a cold DM or an email in the right way where they're
Hmm.
like, here's where we're aligned.
Hmm.
I know that from listening to your show, and this is the value that I would love to bring to your show and your audience, because I looked and you haven't had a guest on about this topic,
Mm.
and I think it would fill a missing hole. So I tell my clients to lead with, but that's also why I don't do the reach outs for my clients
Mhm.
unless I know the hosts like personally, and then I'll start a voice note with the two of them and say, I just want to connect you two because I think you guys would be great and have a good vibe. So I will do that in those cases, but I think it goes a lot further if you take the 20, 30 seconds and send the message to the host on behalf of yourself than it does if I say, hey, I have a client. I think we're a little burnt out on that. I think there's too many unfortunately, there's too many people doing it in a, not a great way that all of us get that vibe sometimes and held against us. So I have my clients send the message. I'll go find the contact information. I'll check for alignment. I'll listen to the show and I'll put it all in a tracker for them to save them time. But I have them send the message. So I lead with showing you've done your homework and that you've listened to their show. That's important to a podcast host. Absolutely. If you want to be on, you should have listened. And then 2 is, what kind of value are you ready to serve their audience? Because we all hate listening to a show or reading a book or have a webinar we're at, and we're just like waiting for like the action, the thing we can go do, and then they never get to it. So leading with the value and just showing that you're a really genuine human being, and that I think a cold DM is totally fine in that sense if you're doing it in that way.
Yeah. I like those tips. I think there's I do think it's funny when people are like pitching themselves and they have no idea what the show is about. Like,
right.
You sure you want to get into this conversation with me? Because I'm going to ask you about your childhood and everything in between. Some people aren't prepared to have those conversations.
No.
And so
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess excuse me. So I guess for somebody who, knows that they want to get on a podcast, they are have like some idea of the things that they want to speak about. Maybe they've identified a few podcasts. What's the difference? I guess you'd already mentioned that, you help do some of that research, but what is the benefit of having, a podcasting guest coach versus doing it all by themselves?
Yeah, well, it's someone to throw ideas off of, right? If you've been coached on anything, it just speeds the process up. You feel so much more confident. So having someone like me, we can do a one-off call. We can do my whole guesting accelerator program. There's a lot of options, but having someone talk that through with you, they're gonna see you. When you're in your business, it's so you're so close to it. It's hard to see all the things. A third party, as you're talking, is going to come up with better titles, more specific topics. They're going to see it easier, especially, people like me with the experience of hosting for 4 years, producing your own, all those pieces that go into it. And I'm not the only one. So if you're not driving with me, like, you go find someone that you do drive with. That's important to find someone like that. But it's going to speed the process up. It's going to help you think about things that you probably aren't going to think about yourself, especially if you don't have your own podcast. I think if you're not in the podcasting world, you might not like quite understand or like get how it works, the flow of it, that type of thing. So you can practice. Like, that's one thing we do. Is the main thing that people like to practice is their introduction to see like, have I said too much? Have I not said enough? I don't want to eat up the whole episode. I want to get to the part where I'm positioned as the authority, figure in this area. So it's going to speed those things up. It's going to let somebody else have some eyes on it instead of just you and your own thoughts, like wondering if it's okay. I did a live coaching call for my podcast. The episode's not out yet, but I did it yesterday where we recorded the session and I just had her on, and she had a lot of blocks, and just having the conversation of a host being like, you're ready. Like, your intro was great. Your offers are aligned. You are in the perfect spot. She's already posting about it. I saw it yesterday on her social media, and she'd been waiting for that. So there's also that piece of just that affirming or not, or saying you're almost there, but let's fix this one thing. And it just can give you that confidence where when you do post about it, when you do share the things that you want to talk about, I think people can feel that in your messaging and that energy, and it's going to allow you to book things faster and attract that type of offer quicker.
Yeah. That's really cool to think about, because I think especially if you're not used to speaking about yourself in front of other people or doing like the interview structure, I think that could be very valuable in having that practice and maybe having things come up in that session as opposed to when you're actually on a podcast and not really sure where to go,
And then it gets done and you don't want to share about it on your social media, and then you kind of break that relationship with the host because you need to share about it, but you get done and you're like, oh my gosh, don't like what I said. And now you
Yeah.
don't want to share. And so, yeah, it kind of alleviates that and gives you like a
Yeah.
test run.
Yeah. Oh, you said something interesting, and I think it's come up a couple times, I think, for me, and and I've seen mentions of it too. Is just the should the podcast guest always be sharing the episode that they're on?
100%. Yes. Do not start your guesting journey if you are not ready to do that. Because, and I'm not saying you have to like send it out to your email list. I know that's very sacred to a lot of people, but if you are going to be speaking on a whole podcast and you're the focus and your message is the highlighted piece of this, and you don't want to share about it, either there's some inner work that you need to work on because that there's some block there for you, or I don't know. But if you're not ready to share it, because I've had that happen too, where a guest hasn't shared the episode, and that's kind of the trade-off. Like as a host, you know that I'm guessing today, so I just get to leave and I'm done. But
Mhm.
you are going to then have to edit the episode, get things ready for social media. There's a lot, show notes, SEO things to consider. There is a lot, and as a host I know that. And so if you're not in the podcasting world, you don't know the work that goes
Mhm.
into it. You just get to guest for your hour and then you leave and you're done,
Mhm.
which is amazing for a guest. That's kind of the trade-off in my mind, is none of us are charging each other for this, although I have
Yeah.
heard of that becoming a thing.
I
Have
have too.
you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have heard of it, but I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't know how
I'm
to
like,
feel
no,
about
it
that.
feels icky to me.
Yeah.
But the trade-off though needs to be something like, how are you going to be on my show and I do all that work, because a guest episode is way more work than a solo episode,
Mhm.
tons more time,
Mhm.
and then you don't share it with your audience. Like that's kind of the trade-off, because your audience should get to see my podcast and vice
Mhm.
versa. That's, we're trading audiences. That's why that alignment piece of some kind and connection with them of some kind is important. I'm not saying you can't be on a show that doesn't fit your exact service and offer, because for example, I was on a show recently about mental health and I have like a
Mhm.
burnout story, and it's
Mhm.
very important to me, and I started a therapy journey. And so that like topic is near and dear to me and very important. So that aligns
Mhm.
with me, not necessarily for business, but there's that alignment piece. So I'm not saying that you can't be on shows like that, but that connection, that value that you have and matches the shows, that's really important.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. I think the one validating, I guess, that because when I first started podcasting, I don't think I realized everything that went in. I mean, like I wanted to do it right, right? I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be able to try to make it the best I could. And I love the guest episode. I mean, most of them are guest episodes, let's be real. But I love having guests on. I love having the conversations. But then when I'm going back and editing, that's easily like another couple hours. And then
Yeah.
the like finding the clips and putting them on social media and doing like the blog post or whatever to link it to and everything like that. It's easily at least 5 hours a week. And so
Absolutely.
in addition to the 1 hour that's spent
Yeah.
with the interviews. And so yeah, I do think that that is important. And I try to, I mean, I've been a guest on a couple of podcasts at this point, and so like try to share that as much as I can as well. And so you had mentioned burnout. For somebody who is wanting to do a podcast but maybe is worried about the burnout aspect because, you know, all the stuff that happens behind the scenes, right? Um, how have you managed that, and what tips would you give to somebody who is considering that but doesn't want to burn out?
Hmm. My biggest thing is to be consistent in a way that works for you. So I think we can get hung up on consistency means one thing, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
every single week you have an episode. But
Mm-hmm.
being consistent can be whatever it means for you. So if you can do 2 episodes a month consistently, great. Pick that. Start where you can. Some people
Mm-hmm.
do seasonal, where they know that these 3 months they can do an episode a week, but then they have these next 2 months coming up, can't do any, because that just doesn't fit for their season of life. So they do a seasonal type style of a show.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we have to just have a little more grace and allow for some of those things to be different. But if the more consistent you can be, then you can kind of play on people's habits. So my episode comes out every Tuesday. So I have some listeners who they'll listen to my episode every Tuesday with their morning coffee, right? Because it's just,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you do. And I do that too with some podcasts. So
Mm-hmm.
If you can get to that rhythm, awesome. But communicating with your audience that my show comes out every other Tuesday or the first Monday of the month, that helps too. And then it kind of releases like the burden and the mental load of like, I got to think of another episode. I got to get another guest book, those wheels that just spin in your head of all those to-dos. So make it work for you in this season of life and be consistent at a level that fits your life. And then be intentional about your podcast. Is it for fun? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's great too. Is it though for a tool for your business? Is it to have all guest episodes and highlight different stories and meet new people and network in that regard? There's no right or wrong answer. But if it's a tool for your business, then you being intentional about it and making sure you
Mm-hmm.
do have solo episodes so you're not just seen as someone that's really good at interviewing people, because I did that in year 2. I loved having guest episodes,
Mm-hmm.
but I was like, wonder why I'm not seeing any listeners, become clients or even download a
Mm-hmm.
resource that's free. And it's like, oh, I was getting comments like, you're so good at interviewing people. And
Mm-hmm.
then I saw a podcasting like mentor that's someone way farther ahead than me. And he suggests 2/3 solo episodes, if that's what you're using your podcast for, because you
Mm-hmm.
can get into that. That's how people would think of you then. So
Mm-hmm.
just being intentional, being consistent, and doing it how it works for you. If you don't want to get into all the bells and whistles of like learning how to put music on an intro, like some of the fancy productions have,
Mm-hmm.
don't do that. You can just start your episode, right?
I'm not
And
doing
some,
that.
yeah, and some
Sorry,
people are,
guys, I'm not doing it.
no, and some people are sick of that anyway. And that's the part people skip or whatever. So you, you don't need to keep doing every single checkbox that like the big production company podcast does. You get to do it on a level that works for you, and you can just start there. And when things become easier, right? In the beginning when you start a podcast, it's like this takes forever. This is such a new skill. I'm not good at any of these skills. And now 4 years in, it doesn't, it's a lot faster and I can do a lot more things. I have systems in place, stuff like that. So know that it gets easier too. There's like a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. I think those are all good things to consider, especially
Yeah.
for anybody
And
who's just
then,
starting out.
yeah. And one other thing to think about as far as like burnout, think about just dabbling in guesting. Sometimes you don't even know if you like it yet, but it's just like on your
Mm.
mind and you think you want to
Mm-hmm.
do it. Just go dip your toe in do a
Yeah,
guest spot. See if you even like that kind of vibe. It's a little different hosting your own show, but it's going to let you feel it out a little bit in some level.
yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right, and part of me kind of wishes I had done that too. Like initially, just
Yeah.
try to be a guest on somebody's podcast.
We don't think about it
Um,
though. You can't
no,
think about that when you don't even, yeah, you don't know what you don't know, that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. And then there's like that imposter syndrome of like, oh, I don't have a mic, I don't have whatever. But I mean, it can be done with your phone. Like I've had people just use their phones and it's been fine. And so um I think that is definitely something that I agree with. And so um you did bring up a good point about, the what's your reason why you want to have your podcast, and if it's going to be there to support your business and whatnot. And so I think that's something that I've been thinking about as well. As like I do love these conversations, but at the same time, it's also not helping my own business goals. And so
Yeah. I know.
um,
I year 2 for me was that light bulb moment. I was like, oh,
yeah,
I get this. Yeah, for sure. But the guest episodes are so fun. And I do think they serve a purpose. Like, you deep dive into a conversation. It's like we're not chit chatting about the weather. We're like in it. We just talked about my childhood and growing up in a house that we literally had on the walls like averages for other people, not for us. Like I don't share that with too many people, especially not as an adult anymore. We're like, do you need therapy? Well, yes, I have been in therapy. No, but like you dive in, and so you just make these great connections too, and
mhm,
network where like I'm gonna follow along with you, and I'm gonna be more likely to engage in the things you're putting out, because I'm like, oh, I know her. Like we talked for an hour so deeply, and as humans in this world, like we don't, especially as moms with kids, like when do we get a chance to do that with people? So I do think it serves its purpose in that regard, but yeah, sprinkle in some solo episodes and you'll be working closer, to your goals of your business goals.
yeah, yeah. So I I think that brings up an interesting point about like making pivots in
Mm,
podcasts as well. And I think at least I don't know if it really held me back initially, but the idea that, I had to commit to something or this was the theme and I have to go with it and I can't change anything and whatnot. I mean, you've obviously pivoted in your podcasting journey.
mhm.
How often do you see other people doing that?
I mean, I think people do it a lot, and I've seen it done a couple different ways. One way is they scrap the whole thing and like launch a brand new one. So they give
Mm,
it a whole new name, a whole
mhm,
new RSS feed, the whole thing, and you start from kind of square one. I did it the opposite way where I kept the same name
mhm,
for a long time. I just recently switched the name, like reversed it. So instead of being Better Brave, and then it was or it was Better Brave with Candace, like living
mhm,
better and braver, than you were yesterday. And then I switched it to Better Brave Podcasting Mentor. Now it's Podcasting Mentor Better Brave, but I've left it as the same show. I've changed the cover art. You can do that. I think we think we're like married and locked in the beginning. Like, I don't know, what can you change? Is it just locked in and you can never change it? You can change it. You can
mhm,
change the wording. So I've done it that way. And the only reason I swapped the names was because I had learned a lot more things about podcast SEO, and I'm
mhm,
still very, amateur at this, but I do know that the first name of your podcast is the first thing that's going to be the most searchable. So I
mhm,
wanted like the word podcasting, since
mhm,
that's what I'm doing, to really be that first word. So I swapped it. But because I had used Better Brave, Better Brave, Better Brave so much,
mhm,
people can still type that in and my show will still come up. That's why I wanted to keep it, because I have 4 years worth of that. So I left it because I think it's cool to see people's progression. So if someone goes back to my first episode, like, you could get my whole life story for the last 4 years. You could get therapy talks. You could know me deeper than my best friend, but you could also just go to the episodes that you want to get the right tips that you want from. But I like that. That's my style. I like seeing people's progression. I relate to that. I like seeing the imperfect journey. Some people don't want that. That's fine too. So that's how I've made my pivots, where I've just changed the description, changed the cover art. But
mhm,
some people burn it all down and start from a new spot, and maybe that works too, but maybe that makes things clearer. I don't know, but that's just been my take on it. I don't
yeah.
think there's a right or wrong way.
I think that's fair. I think it all depends on the person and what their
Hmm.
goals are and how big of a pivot I guess they want to make too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Um, so you had mentioned your podcast, podcasting mentor, Better Brave with
Hmm.
Candace. How else could anybody else find you if they wanted to reach out and work with you?
Yeah, at Candace Dudley on Threads and Instagram is probably the best spot. My website's also candacedudley.com. Lots of things on there,
Hmm.
resources, but come hang out on Threads and Instagram. I think that's where I'm most active and finding the most connections for sure, very easily on Threads. So would love to hear about your podcast or any type of guesting journey that you want to do, but that's where I'll be.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Candace, thank you so much for being here with me today. I think this was a really insightful conversation because it almost feels a little meta in a sense, like talking about podcasting on a podcast.
Yeah, very.
But this has been awesome, and I appreciate the insights that you brought here and shared with everybody. For anybody who wants to work with her, I'll leave her information in the show notes, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks so much for having me. This was such a fun talk.
Yeah, thank you, Candace.